Hello. Welcome back to the GM's Guide. I'm your host, Dan Felder, your kind and merciful GM. As always, if you appreciate this podcast, I'd greatly appreciate a 5-star review on iTunes or whatever other service you're picking it up on. Also, comments, questions, love those too. So, today is another installment in the step-by-step creation of my Raven Shadow campaign. If this is your first episode, you might want to hop back to episode 21 where this whole madness began. The basic idea is that I'm showing step by step how I created one of my favorite campaigns ever, all the way from the very first inception of the reason I wanted to make it to the final adventure summaries. Also, I'm going to be using a lot of terms from episode 10 on 4-act structure in this episode. For the rest of us, let's dive in. Today's podcast is all about how to build a campaign around the players' characters themselves. I want Raven Shadow to be a campaign built around the players. The players' characters need to feel essential to the story, not just random badasses that happen to be the guys handling today's big problem. This isn't a generic summer blockbuster action movie with a band of quirky characters pulled together by chance. It's not the latest problem the Avengers have to face. I want every single scene in the campaign to be essential to the story of at least one of the players' characters. If you remember, I sent out extensive questionnaires to my players back in episode 22. By now they've come back in, and it's time to get to know our 4 protagonists. I'm looking for 2 things when I start building a story around a character. First, I'm looking for the character's growth arc. This means their starting point and their ending point. How do they change over the course of a story? For example, a character might start as an embittered, selfish person and end as a generous and joyful one, such as in The Christmas Carol or How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Where the character starts and ends determines the type of events that I need to include in order to get them from point A to point B. It's like planning a trip. Google Maps is amazing, but even the most advanced software in the world can't give you directions without a starting point and an ending point. Asking how do I get to Washington? From where? You need to know where in order to know what you need to do to get from point A to point B, right? It's pretty simple. Often it's best to start with the end point in a story and work backwards, but I don't have that option. I'm building the story around my players, so the characters that deliver me will determine the starting point of each character's journey in my story. I'm going to look for a way each character might change by the end of the story, which would create a satisfying growth arc in line with my themes. And of course this is going to be based off of the best growth arc that would fit the characters the players deliver me. Alright, second, I need to know what each of the main characters' most powerful motivations is. What do they want so much that it can get them to go all the way from the starting point to the ending point in their growth arc? What goal would they be willing to walk through fire to accomplish? As we talked about way back in the very first episodes of this podcast, you don't want to think in terms of railroads when you're creating your campaigns. You want to think in terms of bait. You put cheese in a mousetrap to attract the mice. You don't build walls until they're forced to walk into the mousetrap. A good author needs to understand what bait will attract their characters. My theme is all about the right thing being worth walking through fire. To build the character stories around this theme, I need to figure out what will motivate them to walk through fire in the first place. Okay, we're going to begin with Carson's character, an elf named Ishida. This was the very first questionnaire that got sent back to me, so that's where we're going to start. I'm going to read an excerpt of what Carson sent me from his extensive character questionnaire and the surrounding material. There exists in the Forever Wild, which is, by the way, a never fully explored forest in my setting, a clan of elves who live alongside a pack of intelligent wolves. As children, these elves will form a strong friendship with a young wolf from the pack. The two become magically bonded, companions and friends for life. However, Ishida's mother was banished from the tribe for reasons unbeknownst to Ishida or his wolf companion, whose name is Leviel, by the way. The wolf's name is Leviel. They settled down in secret on the edge of an inconspicuous town. Whenever Ishida asks his mother about why they left, she always promises to tell him when he's older. As for Ishida's personality, he's shy and fairly reserved, but compassionate. He's a good soul. Leviel, his guardian wolf, is headstrong and boisterous, normally of a very upbeat attitude. There's a notable contrast between the two, and they complement each other. Ishida's mother, whose name is Amara, is caring, supportive, and unassuming. However, she reveals flashes of surprising skill. Several times Ishida has caught her practicing with a blade or a bow, and the sight took his breath away. She has her own wolf named Shizen, who complements her with a strong, quiet, and commanding presence. And also, Shizen is the mother of Ishida's own wolf companion, Leviol. Apart from these little mysteries, Ishida's life has been quiet and uneventful up to this point. At the age of 7, he was apprenticed to the village wizard and has only now begun to learn some real magic at the age of 17, which is young for a human, much less an elf. However, one night, everything changed. Doesn't it always? Amara woke Leviol and Ishida one night and told them to run as far as they could and never come back. She promised to find them again, if possible. She gave them a bag of gold and turned and left. Looking back as they ran, they reached the forest outside of town and saw their home was on fire. That was 1 week ago. That's a good, useful character summary. I particularly like how much material he gave me to work with. The mysteries regarding Ishida's mother, banishment, and abduction are a treasure trove of material. This character description gives me so much more to work with than 50 pages of facts and backstory. A good mystery I can incorporate into the campaign is way more useful than 500 random factoids. Knowing Ishida's favorite food doesn't help me very much, but knowing that the character has built all these mysteries and that the player himself is of course interested in finding out the answers to them, that is absolutely excellent. Now remember, one of the things I'm looking for is a strong character motivation that will get Ishida to walk through fire. You can probably figure out what it is already because the character is very well set up, but the character questionnaire says it right flat out explicitly in the answer to that question. What would Ishida walk through fire to obtain? Carson responded, any lead on his mother. This is a powerful motivation. In fact, it's a motivation hat trick. Ishida wants to find his mother because he loves her. She's family and he cares about her. That's motivation number 1. He also wants to find her to discover what the heck is going on. Why was she banished? Why did they have to run? Who burned down their house? That's motivation 2. He also wants to find her because his best friend's mother went missing with her. Leviol's his wolf companion and his best friend, and Leviol's mother was Ishida's mother's own companion as well. That's motivation 3. This is gold. He wants to find her for his own sake, he wants to find her for his curiosity, and he wants to find her because doing so is also the best way to help his best friend. Perfect setup. These combined motivations can easily take a character on a growth arc. I just need to figure out what growth arc best fits Ishida. How would you summarize Ishida's starting point? Who is he right now in one sentence? Think about it. It's tricky, but luckily we don't actually have to, because I already put that question in the character questionnaire. See how useful this questionnaire is? Make the players do the hard work for you. Here's what Carson wrote for his one-sentence description of his character. Ishida is a naive, reserved child, mercilessly ripped from his home and thrown into the world at large, now desperately scrabbling for what might be left of his life. The word child really stuck out at me. Once I started looking at the character sheet through that lens, I realized it was a perfect setup for a coming-of-age story, also known as a maturation plot. Ishida is a child who looks to others to protect and guide him. He's been sheltered all his life. His very character sheet actually ends up putting so much power into his companion Leviol that the other players joked in early sessions that the confident badass wolf was the real PC and Ishida was the companion. Ishida is a scared kid who just wants to go home, but he can't. Now he's looking for his mommy. Maturation plots are all about maturing. They're all about growing up. The character starts as a kid, someone inexperienced and unable to function on their own. Check. By the end of the story, they've overcome the major rites of passage into adulthood. This usually includes romance. Now, romance can be very awkward at a lot of gaming tables. However, I've played with Carson before, and I've already know this is going to work. In one of the previous campaigns, he latched onto a major romantic subplot in the past. He basically created it himself. He decided his character was falling for a major NPC. And it turned out to be a fantastic part of the campaign, by far his favorite, and it worked out great for the game overall. So, I'm not worried about that at all. In fact, I'm very happy to include a romantic subplot here. I would be looking for one even if the genre wasn't already perfect for it. Now, ultimately, the character in a maturation plot ends the story by proving that they can take care of themselves now. They no longer need a parent. Yeah, Ishida's mother is going to have to die. I'm going to read out a section from my Ishida story planning document. This is what I built to create and track how I was going to handle Ishida's overall growth in the story, sort of a style guide for all my future, more specific micro decisions through the rest of the campaign. This was my overall roadmap for where Ishida was going. Here's what I wrote for the progressive conflict section, which summarizes how I plan to get the character from their starting point to a satisfying ending. Progressive conflict. Kick his supports out from under him. Take away his mother, his best friend, and his new love one by one. Make him work like hell to get some of them back, but his mother will be gone for sure. The corruption and killing of his loved ones, parent, friend, and romantic interest, each representing a different role in his life, robs him of their support to lean on like a crutch and gives him a reason to grow in order to save them. The existence of the romance is also a chance to connect with a new character, and the relationship fits perfectly into the coming-of-age genre. Positive ending point. I write out a possible positive ending point and a possible negative ending point in order to, because, the character is not going to be guaranteed a happy ending. You've got to earn that for yourself. Positive ending point. Ishida is now decisive, determined, bearing emotional scars, but has endured them and thrived despite them. He's a veteran of life that has come out wiser for it and made the important decisions correctly. He may or may not have a happy ending with his romance. Negative ending point. Ishida has been destroyed by tragedy, either truly corrupted by the shadows of the island or having lost the will to continue. He may or may not feature a noble ending if he chooses to die nobly to be with his lost loved ones again. Both those ending points are perfectly sensible results of what might happen to a character that goes through the progressive conflict events that I outlined. But it doesn't have to end this way. If Carson finds a new way that his character might believably and naturally react to these changes, and follows that path instead, that's fine. But I have at least two good ways, or not necessarily good, one's a happy ending, one's a very sad ending, but two sensible outcomes. A standard good end that works very well for the story, and a bad end that is going to be unsatisfying but believable, and it's up to Carson to avoid it. The story is going to be flexible, but I need to have at least some understanding of a way that the players could end that resembles good writing. If you don't have at least one good path, then you're in real trouble. Players might find lots of alternative, really good, brilliant endings, as long as you know that it's set up in a way that results in at least one good one happening. But if you don't have any idea of how this story could end in a satisfying, well-written way, then it's very possible that no such ending exists at all, that your story is not set up in a way that is cohesive enough to deliver a satisfying emotional finish for the character. So, talking about all the different options the players will have, why am I dead set on killing Ishida's mother? Well, the reason is very simple. In fact, it's the same reason that George Lucas killed Obi-Wan Kenobi. You kick the crutches out from under your heroes and force them to stand on their own. Properly handled, it will also be a fantastic subversion of Carson's expectations as a player. If you go out on a heroic adventure to save your mother, you probably expect her to, survive. When she dies a triumphant noble death, worthy of a great tragedy like we talked about in the previous podcast, to save him instead? Ooh, that's good. Yeah, she'll die to save him instead. Complete reversal. Carson will feel the same whiplash that Ishida does. This will get him directly into the skin of his character. This is where the story's algebra begins. I start figuring out what my unknowns are and what my knowns are, and I try to figure out what I can determine from the story structure, from what I already know has to happen. Amara's death is a perfect all hope is lost point for Ishida's story. If you've listened to the podcast on 4-act structure, which I mentioned you might want to before, then you know that the all hope is lost point comes about 75% of the way through the story. It's the ultimate low that sets up the huge reversal for the triumphant climax. It would also make a solid no turning back point. If Ishida becomes motivated by the guilt of his mother's death to take her place and finish what she started, whatever she was here risking her life for, well, that would work really well too. What has she started? What forced her to a noble death? Well, I know that I want her to save him, but why is she in this dangerous place to begin with? I have absolutely no idea, but I've started taking the white space off the page. Amara's death is going to come either at the 75% mark of Ishida's story, signaling all hope is lost, or the 50% mark, signaling the no turning back, where the stakes are raised and he cannot go back no matter how bad things get. I also know that Ishida's love interest needs to be introduced as early as possible. I only have 6 episodes to work with, remember? And 4 characters to focus on. That's not much time to build an emotional investment with a character, or to create a satisfying love story that feels like the relationship has evolved and changed over time. If I don't have much time, I need to get as much value out of it as I possibly can. This means I already know I need to introduce Ishida's love interest in the very first session, as early as possible. I am also going to have to contrive a reason for her to travel with them throughout the campaign, so that Ishida has more time to develop a deep relationship with her. If he only visits her a few times over the course of the entire adventure, that's a lot less time for the relationship to evolve than if she is traveling with him all the way. I'm trying to maximize the time as much as I can. So already, the fact that I know I want to build a romance with a new character has created several constraints that give me a lot of information about what I need to do with the pacing and timing of her character introduction. Now, I've also hinted at the possibility of Leviel himself becoming corrupted by the shadows. Falling to the Shade's temptation probably would not play very well, because Carson might argue that Leviel wouldn't make such a mistake. He can do that, he made the character. Players are amazingly good at finding reasons that their characters would not make mistakes. You don't want to spark those arguments. It just cheapens the integrity of your adventure. If you get into a long argument about, no, he would do this, no, he would do this, and then finally get back to the story and the player's resentful of you, or if you cave and let them have their way, because it is ultimately their character, well, either way, they spent so much time arguing from a writer's perspective that they are taken way out of this session in terms of the adventure living. Now it's adventure arguing. Not very good. So, Leviel should not make a bargain with darkness. However, I've mentioned that the Shadow Lords control the animals on their island, that they're like extensions of their will. What if Leviel were to be bitten by one of the local wolves and steadily infected by the island's influence? What if he were to be bitten and infected by the island's dark influence? Ishida might be forced to leave him behind in hallowed ground and seek out a cure for his friend. That's another support kicked out from under him. Leviel can't travel with him anymore, and it serves as an added motivation to overlap with his mother's death. If his mother's dead, but Leviel can still be saved, Ishida won't be able to collapse just yet. He might have lost his mother, who was the reason he originally came, but he can still save his closest friend. This hands us 3 major characters that Ishida can lean on. Leviel, his best friend, Amara, his mother, and his yet unnamed future love interest. Losing each of them can serve as major points in his growth arc. Leviel becoming infected with the island's dark magic also makes a great no-turning-back point for the story. After all, if he came here to try to find his mother, and he's even closer with his magically bonded best friend that he's grown up next to all his life, then Leviel's infection by the dark shadows that needs a cure before he's steadily corrupted by darkness, well, that's a ticking time bomb. He's absolutely going to stay here, no matter what happens, in order to save his closest friend. However, Leviel being infected by darkness makes a really weak all hope is lost point. Leviel is going to be a badass, but he shouldn't actually be the strongest person. We don't want this to be equivalent to like Dumbledore dying in Harry Potter, who's the most important, strongest, safest person who the whole book is telling you will be safe as long as we have Dumbledore, which of course was set up just so that she could kill Dumbledore. That's Amara's job. Amara serves as the Dumbledore figure here, the parent that's watching over and protecting you, who's stronger and wiser, who you're trying to look to for guidance. That's the all hope is lost point. That works great. Leviel only works with his corruption for the no turning back point. That fits perfectly. So, because his mother's death works for either one, and Leviel's only works for one of the 4 major points of 4-act structure, Leviel's going to be 50%, Amara's death is going to be 75%. It's really that simple. It's really that easy. Figure out what you need and what that means to do well, and the story basically writes itself. Everything will fall into place. So where does his love interest fit into this? I already know. It has to come right at the end. What I mean by the resolution of that relationship, of that romance plot, has to come right at the end of his story. Why? For the same reason her entrance needs to come as early as possible. I need as much time as I possibly can to develop this relationship because it's a new relationship. He's already got years of backstory involving his mother and his wolf friend. He doesn't have anything with this new character yet. I need to get as much time as possible. That means introducing her early, keeping her with the group through the entire adventure, maybe one or two spots where she darts off to the side, but as much main group time as possible. And then finally, the resolution to the relationship comes at the end. Maybe it's a happy resolution, maybe she betrays him, maybe she dies to save him, maybe any number of things. But that resolution needs to come at the end. It's going to be part of his big climax in learning to stand on his own. Which is not sounding good for her, I have to say. But hey, maybe they stand as a team. So, that's the bones of Ishida's storyline already. I'm still missing the 25% point, which is the huge left turn moment, or a clear climax. I really don't understand what his overall story is. I just know some bad things that happened to him along the way to force him to grow. But nothing about his storyline, or his character arc, or his themes, or the themes of the whole campaign, dictates what those events must be yet. They could be anything. They should probably be connected to the mysteries of his mother's banishment and abduction, but again, that could be anything. Now, we want to leave those spaces blank for now and move on to our next character. You don't want to create anything yet until you have as much information as possible about what you need, and we've got 3 other characters to explore. So let's do that first, because right now, all this open space is very flexible. Let's not make our lives harder until we have all the information about what we need done first. And hopefully, the rest of the campaign will write itself as easily as Ishida's major plot moments that we've already mentioned have. Well, the next questionnaire that came in was from Gabe. His character was called Nathan Sky, so we're going to go to his character next. Here's the one-sentence summary from the questionnaire. Nathan Sky is a man who's lost everything because of his own actions, but still hopes to make things right. Once again, Nathan is a man who's lost everything because of his own actions, but still hopes to make things right. Well, that makes my job easy. This is probably going to be a redemption plot. Redemption plots start with a character that is either villainous in nature or else has committed a lot of sins that they might regret but haven't yet atoned for. So they're in a bad place and they feel like a bad person, maybe they are a bad person, and they end by becoming a good person. They end with their character atoning for their sins, either by making an ultimate sacrifice or some other grand gesture that proves their transformation is real and permanent. Nathan definitely has a lot to answer for. Gabe sent me several excellent scenes detailing the character's downward spiral. You see, Nathan and his wife Catherine were professional adventurers. One day their group discovered an ancient tomb filled with treasure. However, it proved to be the burial ground of a powerful lich that the party accidentally awakened. Running for their lives, Catherine was caught in a trap and cried out to Nathan for help. He slowed, but couldn't make himself stop. In that flash of hesitation, he watched his wife impaled on iron spikes. Nathan escaped, but never forgave himself for his cowardice. His daughter Crystal was 16 at the time, and he could never look at her without terrible guilt. She appears to be the very image of her mother in her younger days. Crystal was talented with magic and studying to be a healer, but she couldn't pull her father out of his drunken stupor. Ultimately, she couldn't bear to watch him drink his way to death any further. Feeling like she'd failed her own father as a healer, she left home. That was 5 years ago. Nathan has only just learned now that she's been captured recently by the Sacred Empire. They're the heavily militarized organization I mentioned a few episodes ago, the people that go around acting like an inquisition. They act on behalf of their righteous God and destroy the corrupt and unfaithful. However, they're very big into the whole greater good thing, and they believe in tearing out a problem by its roots. They've been known to set entire towns ablaze because an order of necromancers was hidden among them. Naturally, they're really not fans of arcane magic, whether it's used for healing or not. Now Nathan hears that Crystal has been captured by them and has been loaded into a ship along with other heretics. This news was the one thing that could rouse him from his stupor. He can't let another member of his family die, and he desperately wants his daughter's forgiveness as well, though he doesn't even dare hope for it consciously. That answers the motivation question. Can you imagine anything that would make Nathan turn away from trying to save his daughter? We've got a powerful motivation, a solid starting point, and a straight line to his final redemption. We also know that Nathan is going to die in the final adventure. Unless the player messes up early, of course, then he'll die a bit earlier. No, I'm not a killer GM. I'm sure you must be thinking, oh my god, he's gonna torture his players. All these horrible things. Everyone's dying. I don't want to play in this guy's game, but I promise, this campaign was loved by my players so much, and there's really good reasons for it. Everything is justified, I promise. The tragic endings are triumphs for the hero. I said it last time, I'm saying it again. A great tragedy is a triumph for the hero. I'm not going to put Nathan in some inescapable trap to kill him. I'm going to give him the opportunity to reverse the mistake that's haunted him all these years. If the moment that he regrets is letting a loved one die out of fear for his own skin, what's the ultimate reversal of that? Sacrificing his own life to save a loved one instead. If the moment he regrets was letting a loved one die out of fear for his own life, now he can reverse that by sacrificing his life to save the loved one instead. That is the ultimate proof of his redemption and the ultimate atonement for his mistake. That's why I know he has to die. It just works too well. It's the most obvious reversal point of the entire thing. Now, if his character arc had been built on something other than cowardice for his own life, I wouldn't be trying to kill him by the final. I'm not trying to kill Ishida, but I'm going to give Gabe an opportunity to take Nathan and have his character die to atone for his sins in the perfect reversal of what caused them in the first place. And I highly expect that Gabe will love this option and will choose it for himself. As to how we actually get there, here's what I wrote in Nathan's story planning document. Progressive conflict. Nathan begins his story out of obligation. He chases his daughter not because he believes he can help her, he hates himself, but because he knows this is all his fault, and doing nothing feels even worse than trying, feeling like he'll probably screw it up. He needs to be shown the error of his ways so that he would never make the same mistake again, and when it comes time to choose again at the end of the adventure, to know that he will choose correctly this time, or else utterly prove that he's beyond all hope. That would be the negative ending point. This means demonstrating the full consequences and horrific results of his past actions to him, and also showing that he is better than this, that he can make up for his mistake, and that he can be a hero that his family and his daughter deserves. How can we show Nathan the full horror of what he's done? Nathan needs to face the consequences of his actions and make things right. We see the product of his wife's death in what happens to Crystal. Feeling she's failed as a healer because she couldn't help her own father, Crystal will have turned to dark magic in a similar self-destructive path. Nathan will see a mirror of his own downward spiral in her, and it'll come as a great shock to see Crystal using black magic. Gabe assumes that she was captured by the Sacred Empire because she's a magic user, even though it's harmless healing magic. In reality, she feels she's failed as a healer, and she was captured for a very good reason. She's become a dangerous witch. So, that's the end of that section. And now let's talk about this again. The major question that's looming right away is, well, if Crystal's a big, powerful, scary witch, should Crystal be our main villain for the campaign? The Jester is the person whose spirit is reflected in the setting. He doesn't necessarily need to be the main villain. None of our characters have a personal grief with the Jester. So we'd rather, if at all possible, that the main antagonist of the campaign is someone the players already have a good reason to hate in their story. Otherwise, it's just like Ultron. It's a new villain that everybody, comes to hate and comes to want to stop, but it loses some major impact compared to, Luke, I am your father. That's much stronger. So, should Crystal be our main villain? No, that's too indirect. Nathan's original mistake, which everything else cascaded out from, was leaving his wife to die in the tomb of a lich. In the tomb of a lich that they woke up. Maybe it wasn't a lich at all. Maybe they just assumed that the decaying corpse with glowing eyes and extraordinarily dark magical power was a lich. Maybe it was a ghoul. Maybe it was the ghoulish Jester. Maybe they woke up Nikolai from his slumber in the Shadowfell. Why has the Jester's Island come back now? It can always be a coincidence, but how much better would it be to make all the horrors of the campaign the product of Nathan's original mistake? Maybe Nathan's group didn't realize the tomb they found led through the planes of existence into the Shadowfell, right into the sleeping Jester's crypt. They woke him up, and only Nathan escaped. He spent 5 years getting himself back together, and now it's time for a grand entrance. Actually, let's take this a step further. Let's confront Nathan directly with the full horror of his actions. What if Catherine is the villain of the campaign? The Jester could easily have turned her into a lich, especially if the Shade was still running things to a degree after he started to wake up. Catherine's impaled on spikes. He brings her back as a lich, as a servant, as the first of his servants, as he's about to reclaim his throne. However, as he's putting himself back together, still weak from his years of slumber, Catherine gets her hands on the Shadow Scepter that I mentioned last episode, the one that Nikolai created and has the power to control all the dark magic of Ravenswalk. Suddenly, that gives us a great reason for Catherine to actually have enough power to be in the position of the arch-villain of the campaign. This works so well. The adventurers will learn about the legend of Nikolai before they go to the island, and will be suitably terrified, assuming the Jester is coming back and is now in charge. Then at some point, I'll reveal the island's lord is actually Nathan's own wife, Catherine, driven mad by her murder and undead transformation. Nathan hates himself for leaving her, and she hates him for it too. This isn't a situation where the person you left behind is sitting happily in heaven and wishing you'd forgive yourself and move on, that they understand and they forgive you. No! Nathan's going to learn that his wife has gone through more torment than he ever suspected in his worst nightmare of self-ridden guilt, and she wants him to suffer for it. We'll even get a chance to have the fantasy version of a custody battle, with the Lich Catherine wanting to claim their daughter. Crystal's already halfway there as a user of dark magic. Nathan is in a battle for his daughter's own soul, and this is all his fault. He keeps thinking everything's his fault. Well, here it kind of is. The Jester's back, his wife's a monster, his daughter is using dark magic and might be being corrupted by his own wife that is in the state because he left her. This is all his fault. That gives Nathan a huge amount of drama and challenge to overcome. We're going to confront him with the consequences of his actions as a literal force of antagonism. We're going to take his inner conflict and inner guilt, and we're going to manifest that. It's something that the genre works really well with, an external force, and is an active force of antagonism that you have to resist and struggle against. And that's going to work very, very, very well. Also, we get another motivation hat trick. The players are going to be working together to stop Catherine from doing something bad. We don't know yet, but something bad's going to happen. She's taking control of the island. She's bringing it back out of the Shadowfell. I could definitely arrange some sort of bad thing that they're trying to resist. So he'll want to stop her for those reasons. Additionally, he'll want to either kill her or save her in some way just to put her out of her misery. And that's another motivation. And also, again, he's in sort of a fantasy version of a custody battle for his daughter's soul, with his wife, Catherine, the undead lich, trying to corrupt her further onto the path of dark magic, and him wanting her to come back toward the light. That's reason number 3. This is a solid stopping place for this podcast. We've already got a huge amount of material to work with. We've established our primary antagonist and several major plot points and major events that will happen throughout the campaign, and we're only 2 characters in. Next time we're going to go into the other 2 characters sent in by Chad and Ian. These guys are fascinating players to GM for. They're basically exact opposites. Ian is a tactical mastermind. He doesn't care about the writing aspect of these games at all. He approaches them as these deep tactical puzzles, and he commits to his character's motivation so deeply that he spends weeks and weeks thinking about absolutely everything that could possibly impact what these guys are doing in the world, and it's phenomenal to watch. He's amazing to work with. Meanwhile, Chad loves portraying these dark characters. He loves creating characters that make deals with darkness, make deals with the devil, and are fonts of incredible dark power, and more morally ambiguous and ethically shaky, which, as you can already tell, has no place in this campaign setting. So he's an amazing creator, just fantastic to work with, fantastic to GM for, and normally his characters add very interesting moral gray areas into heroic campaigns. However, it goes completely against the thematic goals for Raven Shadow. And I knew that. And if I had known what my goals were, I might have thought twice about inviting him. Not because I don't think he's good, he's amazing, but because the type of character that he enjoys playing has no place as a player here. If he makes deals with darkness, he's going to get punished for it. It was consequently with great trepidation that I opened his character questionnaire. And that's where we're going to start with the next podcast. Thanks for listening. Again, if you enjoy this podcast, I would greatly appreciate getting a 5-star review on whatever platform you happen to be listening to this on. And if you like this content, you might like some of the other stuff that I create, talk about, record videos on, and so on. And you can find all of it at danfelder.net. That's DANFELDER.net. You can also follow me at DesignerDanF for Twitter. And if you ask me questions there, I will answer them. And again, I got back to this podcast because of a listener went on Twitter and said that all they wanted for Christmas was to find out what happened in Raven Shadow. So here I am, and here we are. Thanks for listening, guys. I'll see you next time.